Have you ever found yourself offline, disconnected from the outside world? Have you ever found yourself using the prestigious Google Chrome web browser? If so, chances are you have played this game already. This endless runner was developed by 3 Google employees and released back in 2014 as a funny Easter egg. What no one expected was that it would become what's probably the most famous browser game ever. It even has a statue and its own Simpsons intro sequence. I kind of grew up with this game and it holds a very special place in my heart. So when I was looking for a fun challenge to force myself to improve my game development skills, remaking it was the first thing that came to mind. So that's what I've been doing this past week, trying to rebuild it from scratch using godot. But this time in 3D and with colors and ray tracing. Okay, maybe not ray tracing. Everything started with me doing my research. I played the game for a good while to try and truly grasp every detail of how it feels to play it, because I wanted to go for a very faithful recreation. I also watched this video, which explains a lot of the inner workings of the game. With all the research done, I started working on the assets. Modeling the dinosaur was incredibly fun. Texturing was nice also, as I think I'm already getting the hang of it. But after that, I got to the difficult part. Animations! On my last video, I participated in a game jam, and while I was making the assets for my project, I realized that while I do have basic modeling skills in Blender, I was totally clueless when it came to rigging and animations and all that stuff. So in the end, I had to animate everything inside of Godot, which thankfully was totally possible in that case, although it's not always going to be ideal. And for that reason, for this project, I decided one of my main goals was gonna be doing all the animations directly inside of Blender, which I think was definitely justified because animations were indeed a bit more complex this time around. First, I had to rig my model. Rigging is the process of giving your 3D models bones that allow you to control them and kind of deform them to create different animations. I watched a couple tutorials beforehand, so I wasn't that clueless, but it still was a very tricky process. When I had my model finally rigged, I had to set up inverse kinematics for the legs, which essentially allow you to move them in a more natural fashion. This further simplifies the process of animating the model. Eye case, which is what people call these things, are super handy indeed, but implementing them also gave me lots of headaches. But after going through all that was left was to create the animations for this little dino. So I made them, a running animation and a crouching animation, and also a bonus idle animation. Fantastic. Then I started working on the second biggest enemies of our protagonist, cacti. Wait, second biggest enemies? You might be asking. And yeah, second, because first one is this abominable bird. Oh, sorry, not a bird. This abominable pterodactyl! Oops, not technically a pterodactyl either. This abominable pteranodon, I guess? It's interesting to talk about why I decided to make it green. You see, nothing in the original game is colored, so as far as I know there's no canon coloring or anything. But still I couldn't quite explain why I thought that T-Rex should be orange. That's until I remembered this show I watched as a kid called Dinosaur Train, and yeah, that's pretty much where the colors came from. Also, I practiced my rigging some more with it and gave it a clunky flying animation. I made a desert for the background, because where else could this game possibly take place? And then it was game making time. I opened up my beloved Godot and started importing my assets right away. I first set some things up and adjusted the lighting to get those potato graphics I love so much. And to make it all the more potato, I also cranked the resolution down to some good 360p. Then it was time to set up those animations that I had so lovingly prepared. For that, I used a node Godot has called Animation Tree. It basically allows you to do all kinds of things with your animations, changing them, blending them, transitioning between them, all you could ever need animation-wise, to sum it up. I even found out a way to make it so that animations played specifically when certain conditions are met in code. So, for example, I could make my player crouch or stop crouching just by setting up some conditions on the animation tree itself, without having to manually change the animation through code. Truly an amazing feature of this node that apparently not a lot of people know about. This is the video I got it from. And if you're planning to use the animation tree node, I highly recommend watching it. And that was it. Our fat dino could now run and crouch. But the most important action this dinosaur does was yet to be implemented. Jumping! Godot offers you various different approaches for giving your character's movement. You could get a rigid body if you want to focus more on the physics side, or maybe a character controller if you want to have a little bit more control over the exact way your character moves. These options come with lots of functionality out of the box and handle collisions and all that for you. So which one do you think I picked? Of course, none of them. I had to go and make my own custom solution because I'm different and special. But don't worry, I got what I deserved. Implementing the jumping mechanic took much more time than I'm willing to admit. And for the life of me, I couldn't get it to feel natural. I tried everything, even using curves. Can you believe it? I made a very convoluted system where you had many different forces acting on the player at the same time, and it was a huge mess, honestly. In the end, it turned out I was just overcomplicating things, and getting the jumping to be all floaty and responsive, just like I wanted it to be from the start, was just a matter of simplifying my code more than anything else. I was getting all crazy over nothing, and a lot of times when you're coding, I found that going away from the keyboard for a while and talking about the situation you're facing out loud can really help you put things into perspective and make you see your problem and its solution more clearly. I already had a jumping dinosaur, and by the way, I made it so that when he jumps, his movement animation slows, cause that way it seems more like it's actually jumping. Controlling the speed at which his movement animation plays needed to be done anyways, cause later he'd be speeding up. Also, I smoothed out the transition for when he crouches and gave the player the ability to fall faster when pressing down the crouch button while in mid-air. Now I had to make the dinosaur run, but that's the neat part. It doesn't. This game, like most things in video games actually, is a huge illusion. The dinosaur is not what's moving. In fact, it's everything else that moves, while the dinosaur stands still the whole time and just jumps over and over again. That's how the original game works, and that's how mine is going to work as well. Here you can see how I made the desert advance infinitely. It keeps going left until it reaches a certain point, and then it teleports to the rightmost side again, repeating the eternal cycle once more. By this point, the game was already starting to take shape, but it was time to finally add the thing that makes it really interesting: obstacles. So I added a node that would spawn cacti after a certain amount of time, each time choosing a random variation out of all the cacti I modeled. It's important to mention that cacti in this case move the same amount the desert does, and once the player can't see them anymore, they're deleted, cause if not, we would probably have a performance issue for no reason at all. Sorry, cacti. Then I gave the player and the cacti collisions and made sure whenever the player touches anything that's not the floor, it's game over. Cause that's pretty much what happens in the original. Everything's out there trying to get you. While figuring out how to enter the game over state properly, I somehow ended up with this funny mechanic of slowing down time while you jumped. It was actually dope, but this is a faithful adaptation, so much to my regret, bullet time had to be removed. Now the player could technically die, though he didn't seem all that dead to me, but we'll talk about how I solved that later. Regardless, it seemed to me the desert was looking way too boring, and that's because we still needed to make our cacti spawner randomize their scale and the amount in which they appear. Then, I added a score. After this, someone told me the dinosaur was looking a bit too fat, which offended us a lot. Me and our little dino, I mean. So I, again, much to my regret, put him on a strict diet, which resulted in a drastic weight loss. We will miss you, fat dinosaur. Also, of course, I had to make it so that the more you advanced, the more the dinosaur would speed up. Though technically it's everything else but the dinosaur that speeds up. The speed of his running animation changes though. That's why I told you before that being able to control how fast his animation plays was gonna be useful. Now it was time to add those menacing pterodactyls. In the original game there are 3 places where they can spawn. Above you, so that you can't jump, on the floor to make you jump, or in the middle, which is what crouching is for actually. Though you can also jump over these if you time it well. What I did was to create 3 marker 3D nodes. These nodes are essentially just markers that allow me to tell the obstacle spawner which are the 3 exact spots where I want pterodactyls to appear. The spawner then chooses one randomly and gives birth to one of these angry birds. After adding collisions to them too, and adjusting the collision box of the dinosaur so that it shrinks while crouching, we finally had our full roster of villains ready, though I made sure pterodactyls pterodactyls only spawned after you reach a score of 1500, and gave them a 1 in 4 chance of appearing instead of cacti, because I feel like in the original game, they're definitely more uncommon than cacti. Then I noticed that while the speed of our dinosaur was faster the more you advanced, and it was reflected on his running animation, his crouching animation was always the same speed, so I fixed that real quick. I made the pterodactyls continue moving after they've killed you as well. With our game being pretty much done, I created a modified version of our protagonist's texture, but this time depicting him as a dead dino. I of course changed his texture to this one on death, which is something that happens in the original game too, even if in a more family-friendly way. In my headcanon though, it's impossible you don't die while crashing at those tremendous speeds. Then I fully entered the polishing phase, and to avoid boring you with it, here's a quick summary of what I did. Adding a proper game over screen and retry button. Adding some kind of start screen where the dinosaur is just idling and you have to jump to start the game. Adding a cloud generation system that took me way too much time. Adding nighttime, adding the sounds of the original game. Adding a drum loop that constantly plays in the background and speeds up as you speed up. This isn't in the original, but I thought it would be a cool thing to have. Adding mobile controls. If you happen to play the game on a mobile device, you can touch the right side of the screen to jump and the left side to crouch. It works surprisingly well, actually. And in fact, it was very lucky that I made it playable on mobile, cause while testing the game on my phone, I discovered I had forgotten to use Delta somewhere in my code, so if you happen to have a lower frame rate, then your dino would jump higher. It was tricky to fix, but I finally did it, and with that the game was ready, at last. It's been a tough week, yes, but I can't believe how much making this game, that's apparently so simple, has taught me. It truly goes to show the power of doing your own little projects. Sure, tutorials are a fantastic way to learn about stuff, but if you truly want to transform those things you learn into knowledge you can use on your own, then you have to go and apply what you've learned. That's undeniable. Of course I didn't go into that much detail here for your own sake, but there were so many difficulties and confusing moments during the development of this small game you can't even imagine. However, at the end of the day, what matters is how much more confident I am now as a game developer compared to when I started. And that I finally got to learn how to make animations inside of Blender, which I'm sure will be useful in the future. If you want to play the remake, it's available as a web game on my itch.io profile, which I'll try to link in the description, though I'm not sure if YouTube will allow me to post external links just yet. It's kind of funny, by the way, how the original was meant to be played on moments when you are offline, and mine requires an internet connection to be played. Thanks so much if you've watched this far. I also want to thank everyone who supported this channel so far, which is a lot of people, and in case you're new here, be very welcome. I'm Ruben and I post videos about my game development endeavors on this channel. You can leave any suggestions that you might have or just whatever you want to tell me in the comments, because I'll be reading all of those. Till next time.